When does authority become illegitimate? Not inconvenient, not unpopular, not simply disagreed with, but illegitimate. Every organized society creates systems of authority. Councils, courts, governments, institutions. Authority itself is not unusual. Humans have always organized themselves this way. Large groups of people require structure, coordination, and decision-making systems in order to function. But authority always begins with a question that is rarely examined closely. Who granted it? And under what conditions was that authority granted in the first place? Because authority is often presented as permanent. Once a system exists, it is usually framed as something that should continue indefinitely. Laws remain, offices remain, institutions remain. The assumption becomes that authority, once established, should simply persist. But history tells a different story. Authority survives only while the people who granted it believe it still serves its original purpose. And that purpose is usually straightforward: protection of rights, maintenance of order, preservation of stability. Authority exists to serve the people who allow it to exist. But what happens when that relationship begins to shift? What happens when authority slowly begins producing the very problems it was originally meant to prevent? When protection becomes restriction? When representation becomes distance? When service becomes control? When decisions affecting millions of people begin to move further and further away from the people those decisions affect? At that point, something subtle begins to change. Not always in the institutions themselves, but in the perception of the people who granted authority in the first place. Because authority ultimately rests on a shared belief. A belief that the system still functions for the common good. But belief is not permanent. Belief changes quietly, gradually, often almost invisibly. People begin asking questions they did not ask before. Small doubts begin forming in places where certainty once existed. Conversations begin shifting. Confidence becomes hesitation. And when belief begins to fracture, legitimacy begins to weaken. Not because laws disappear overnight, not because institutions suddenly vanish, but because confidence dissolves. History shows this pattern repeating again and again. Institutions rarely collapse suddenly. More often, they slowly lose the confidence of the people they were originally designed to serve. Which raises a deeper question. If authority is granted by the people, and legitimacy depends on the continued belief that authority still serves its purpose, then who decides when that purpose has been lost? The institution, or the people who granted authority in the first place? And if that moment ever arrives, how would anyone recognize it? Does anybody know?